Hi, everyone. I'm going to try to keep this brief because I think the Q&A part's going to be a lot more exciting for all of us. But for those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Arielle, Yael Mokhtarzadeh. I'm a fourth-year communications major at UCLA, double minoring in public affairs and Israel studies, and I have the privilege of serving as our undergraduate student association council president this year. I see a lot of Bruins in the room as well, so I want to do a quick shout out to all of you. Wow, amazing. It's wonderful to see you all. Before I begin, I want to begin with a few thank yous. First of all, to Noah for having the bravery to come out here and share your experiences. And thank you to Michael for sharing the history and the academic perspective as well. And really thank you to Susan for inviting me to be part of this today. And also, thank you to all of you. This is not an easy conversation to be a part of, and it's a very easy conversation to disengage from. And the fact that you've made the time, regardless of what your perspective is on this particular issue, to be here and talk about it is important and deserves recognition. So thank you. Israel and Palestine, the people, the histories, the struggles, and the dialogue, or lack thereof, have been a big part of my 4 years at UCLA. I was and still am excited at the prospect of telling you all a bit more about the experiences that I've had as a student at UCLA dealing with this issue, but I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about myself. I am an Iranian-American Jew. Each of those identities, individually and collectively, have played an important role in my coming into my identity as a progressive. From my Iranian immigrant parents, I learned of the power of the privileges we are afforded by living in the United States today. I learned to be proud of where I come from and never compromise that for the sake of where I'm going. My Jewish values are at the heart of why I do what I do, striving to live in the gray, guided by the words of Rabbi Tarfon in Pirkei Avot that said, it is not my responsibility to finish the work of perfecting the world, but I'm also not free to desist from it either. And as an American, I am all too aware of the privileges and imperfections of this country and my opportunity to work to make it better. Oftentimes on campus, we use language like pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, anti-Palestine. I don't like using that language. I think calling myself pro-Israel mistakenly provides the assumption that I'm anti-Palestine. That is not at all the case. I am proud of my Zionist identity. My belief in the self-determination of the Jewish people is rooted in the same values and morals that predicate my belief in the self-determination of the Palestinian people. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to say to you all. I've given many speeches about BDS before, but none of them ever really struck a chord with me because they never felt nuanced enough, complex enough, and so I'm going to try to give you the most nuanced and complex perspective that I can give you. I think it's a really important, critical point the Democratic Party is reaching right now in this conversation. I think we have reached that point on our campuses a few years ago. And in a lot of ways, this particular issue has monopolized our student government. It has made it impossible for us to make real progress on supporting and defending some of the most marginalized communities on our campus because this one issue has driven a wedge between forward-thinking, progressive individuals who can agree on just about everything except for this one particular movement. So I personally do not support the BDS movement, not because I believe it's anti-Semitic, not because I believe that it is personally an affront to me as a Jewish person. I don't support it on the basis that it is divisive, it is inconclusive, I believe it's counterproductive, and it's just too plain easy. I believe BDS is divisive because in my time at UCLA, I have been told that I can't be part of certain movements and part of certain conversations simply because of my Jewish identity. Looking at the last 4 years at UCLA, from the moment this conversation began, there has been such a stark strike, an increase in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on campus. There is no reason why there should be lines drawn between students on the basis of their identity just because of a movement that predicates and believes that they should be. When I got to UCLA, I had gone to Jewish day school all my life, so I thought it was really important for me to reach beyond my bubble, right? And anti-normalization isn't good on any part, and I believe and I encourage the students who come from the high school that I came to go to their campuses and learn about the Palestinian narrative. I hadn't had a Palestinian friend until I got to UCLA, and I'm proud to say that now I have many, and they have really complexified my perception of this conflict and allowed me to better understand narratives across the board. So in my first year, I began attending meetings held by Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace. And what was fascinating to me about those meetings was that the messages, the needs, the stories that I heard shared in those meetings were the same messages, needs, and stories I heard shared in my club, Bruins for Israel. And yet, rather than ever talking to each other to attempt to understand our parallel narratives and the struggles that we face and where they converge and when they maybe don't, we were engaging in anti-normalization on both sides. Bruins for Israel was unwilling to talk to Students for Justice in Palestine, and Students for Justice in Palestine was unwilling to talk to Bruins for Israel, and that was all because of one vote that happened every single year. And in 1 year, 13 hours of students not talking about policy, not criticizing issues on the ground, criticizing each other, and drawing really horrific lines and attacking students on the basis of their identity. And that didn't help anyone. If I had been at UCLA in the first year this issue came up, as a Jewish student, I wouldn't have voted no and I wouldn't have voted yes. I would have encouraged us not to have the conversation as a student government vote, because telling one community that their issues matter more to another doesn't help change any of the realities in Israel Palestine. It doesn't help change any of the realities in our campuses, and it just makes one community feel like they can't have a conversation. BDS is inconclusive. I think the fact that the movement itself has, as Michael really shared, these goals that don't have a clear solution in mind makes it very difficult for me to get behind it, right? Is the occupation in reference to 1948? Is it in reference to 1967? If we can't answer those questions, are we really comfortable supporting a movement that doesn't have clear goals? I am more than happy to have that conversation. But I think the issue is that when we turn it into a matter of pro and anti, support for BDS or opposition to BDS, we take away the opportunity to have these critical conversations. So I can tell you what we're doing on the campus end to create spaces for these conversations. Never in my time at UCLA have I seen these two communities come together, so I took it upon myself. In the week that for one community is Israel Independence Week, and for another community is Palestine Awareness Week, to organize a panel called 1948 from different perspectives, where we had an Israeli Jewish professor, a Palestinian Muslim professor, and an American Jewish professor come together to talk to different perspectives of 1948, right? And the Israeli professor spoke about his family coming to what was then Palestine after the Holocaust and finding refuge in a place where they had called home for thousands of years but never really lived. And on the other hand, you had the Palestinian professor who spoke about the Nakba, right, and spoke about the catastrophe, what 1948 was for the Palestinian people. And you had the American professor who came out and said, I am very much connected to this issue, but my feelings are not the same as those who live those realities, right? Those conversations aren't happening today because we are too caught up on this one issue that wants to paint this as black and white. It is not black and white. And when we turn people's stories and narratives into a vote of yes or no, we are dehumanizing them. We are trivializing their experiences, and we are making it impossible for us to actually get to the root of the issue, which is our lack of willingness to recognize the humanity of the other. Additionally, there was a time when a group of students at UCLA tried to get those running for student government to sign a pledge that they wouldn't travel to Israel and Palestine to learn. That is the biggest mistake of all. Right? If we expect students, and elected students at that, to have informed opinions about what's happening on the ground, shouldn't they travel there to learn about it themselves? That's why a group of students who came before me got together and said, if they want to boycott traveling to Israel, we're going to send as many student leaders to Israel and Palestine as we can. And this is a group of students from different parts of the political spectrum, different parts of our campus politics spectrum, who come together every December to travel to Israel, Palestine, to hear from Israelis and Palestinians and to learn their stories, so that when they come back to campus, they don't say, oh, I don't know enough to have an opinion. They don't say, oh, I think Israel can do no wrong, or no, I think Israel can do no right. Right? And it's in those moments that we can recognize each other's humanity that I think we'll really be able to get to a real solution. And I think, honestly, my biggest issue is that BDS is too easy, right? By saying that one side is wrong and one side is right, we're taking away our ability to really get to the root of the issue. If we really want the wall to come down, does it help when we are pointing fingers in one way and not recognizing the humanity of another? I think that we need to create opportunities for people like us to come together and have a real conversation about the issues, right? We've spent an hour now discussing the merits of a movement without talking about any of the actual issues here. And I think that's a mistake. So I guess the hardest part for me in all of this is that I believe that if you're going to put down one alternative, you have to propose another. I've spent the last 4 years of my life trying to think of a viable alternative, a viable action that we can all take collectively as people who care deeply about Palestinians and Israelis and their humanity and their dignity as people. And so I guess that's the question I want to pose to you all today. What is an alternative that we can take together? Those who are holding up signs directed at me and snickering as I'm speaking, and those who are smiling and clapping, neither of those things matter in this space. What matters is our ability to recognize the humanity of the people who agree and disagree with us, and our ability to come together to find a just and peaceful solution for both peoples. Thank you.